You're listening to Witch Wednesdays, a semi-weekly podcast source for all things witchcraft in the modern world. Join your host, Steph, on Wednesday mornings to chat about seasons, Sabbats, and all new witchcraft topics to help you make your life more magical. Welcome back to Witch Wednesdays. I apologize if my voice goes out a little bit. I am slightly under the weather, but pushing through. And my guest had a little bit of tech issues getting started. So this day is all about pushing through. So I'm going to turn it over to them so they can introduce themselves and let you know where you can find them online.
Okay, I am best known as Michelle Belanger. If you're old school, you've probably seen me on Paranormal State hunting ghosts in a blindfold. But I'm the author of Dictionary of Demons, Psychic Vampire Codex, and a bunch of other books, but including the most recent, Past Life Prompts. You can find me at michellebelanger.com, and that's sort of the clearinghouse of everything because I do a lot of stuff. The books and handmade incense and oracle decks and a ton of classes. And if my name is hard to spell, the easier place to find me is patreon.com/haunted.
Oh, that's so easy.
Yeah.
I love that you got that and made that work. That's wonderful. So we are going to, chat about like a whole bunch of things today, but you are correct that my first knowledge of you, or my better knowledge of you, is from your books on demons. So I was excited to see that you had something coming out about past lives. I think that is very interesting to me. And I also love a journal style book. So it's like all the things I love in one.
Well, so I used to also, and actually do again, write games and do RPGs. And one of the things that I really like about that is the fact that you can have these collaborative experiences. And as we've moved forward with how we engage with media, the Past Life Prompt journaling book came about because I wanted something where, when I was young and getting into all this stuff, there were psychics who would be like, I will tell you what your past lives are. And that always didn't sit right with me because I felt like, well, that's my journey. Only I could answer what that question is and what it means. So I wanted something that wasn't me dictating to people how to do it or what it meant, but something that gave them a vessel that they could fill themselves with their own journey at their own pace. That was guided in very subtle ways to just trigger potential memories. And that's how this came together.
I love it. And over 250
We
prompts.
trimmed it down because it was long. It was a lot. I wanted to cover every possibility because, I've been doing work with past life recall and like leading past life regressions in small groups and in like large conventions and stuff for, God help me, 30 years. Uh, it's been a while. And just realizing that something as simple as one sensory trigger can have an effect of pulling up a memory for a person. And it can be 15 different memories for 14 different people. And finding a way to curate those so that they are not also front loading and guiding which memory you pull up. Instead, immersing with emotion and open-ended ideas, or getting people to be like, what are you wearing? What do your hands feel like right now? Like really tactile, really immersive stuff that invite the person to place themselves somewhen.
So for somebody picking this book up for the first time and doesn't really have a lot of experience with past life work, would they be able to dive in and still use these prompts?
I think so, 100%. I bookend the journal with very concise, actually, I think some of my best tight writing because I am often a wordy bastard. The Dictionary of Demons is ridiculously long. But I bookend it with an introduction not only to like what memory means and how we engage with it, but like what some of the pitfalls are and like when it's a good idea to maybe step back and also how to interpret your own experience. So I don't just like toss you into a bunch of prompts without a life raft. Uh, but I do pull back on the very natural impulse to like give you 15 extra chapters of like, this is what cryptamnesia is, and this is, how you're front loaded, and this is why if you watched the Discovery Channel on Ireland when you were 5, you might have a lot of memories that you think are about druids, and it's just you watched a show. Because that does happen. Um, how I would actually suggest somebody engage with it is in that time-honored tradition of using a book for divination, flip it open to a page and go and see what comes out. And don't try to overthink what you are doing in answer to that prompt. And also, one of my other suggestions is set yourself a little timer, because if you get nothing from the prompt for, a minute and a half, 2 minutes, and nothing is coming, then it's not prompting anything for you. And if you push too hard, you're just going to make shit up, because that's our brain will do that. It will very happily be like, oh, well, this is a story I need to tell myself, right? Okay. Um, so yeah, I think somebody completely new to things can dive in. If they're really uncertain, there is a certain amount of the novelty of the prompts has a utility if you feel like you've never come to them before. You just open it up and you see what it sparks. But if you are struggling, it doesn't hurt to just thumb through the book and see if something grabs you. Does one jump out more than another? Follow that thread. Where does it lead? What comes out? My other tip for people who would be really new to this stuff is it does not have to be fancy. It does not have to be complete sentences or full paragraphs. It can jump around. The memories will often come forward for a lot of people first, like feelings, like in a lot of the way that like you might remember a dream. It's disjointed. It's not necessarily in linear time. You might remember late in life things first, but there's also aspects of how we remember as beings that kind of key us into what's a genuine memory or not. I'm really visual, so I know to expect memories that are very visually immersive. And if I have something that has me remembering with Tolkien-esque detail the names of everybody around me, it should be suspect, because names are really hard for me. Like I have to work to have names, even in this life, get remembered. Like there has to be something really unique about that name for it to lodge in my brain. And knowing that quirk, it helps me sort of assess this is more likely a genuine memory, or this is me telling myself a story.
I think that's really interesting that you said, jump to what calls to you, because that's exactly how I approach the book, which is really weird for me because I am a start to finish book reader, and I always, read all the, acknowledgments and introductions and everything from beginning to end. And when I got yours, I automatically flipped to the middle. I was like, nope, I want to go through this, and I had no reason for that. It just felt right.
So I've always done a little bit of magic with my books. Um, I think I did it most consciously with the various versions of the Vampire Codex, but it's everything, because words are magic. And this book, I wanted this book to want to just open to whatever random page was the right page in that moment. And like a little bit of that intention is woven through the architecture of the prompts themselves and the choice of language. Uh, so it's nice to know that it's working. It's always
Yeah,
nice to know that the magic works. Uh,
very interesting.
yeah,
That way.
because like you, yeah, I'm really linear. I'm one of those people where I've got fictional writer friends who can write the end of a story in the middle of a story and like little bits in between and then like paste it all together in a jigsaw. And I cannot do that. I have to start with the first line and just chug my way all the way through
Yeah.
my main force alone until I get to the last line and it's done. And that's usually how I do my books. And again, this one was more like flashcards, like just little things. We when we were doing the book design, the folks at Crosscrow were so great with the layout and working with that, but also the sort of trying to come up with a non-pattern among the prompts, because of course there are prompts that could cluster and then unintentionally steer somebody's narrative. So we put a lot of thought into which prompts get put next to one another, and if they were too similar, or if they seemed to like these both could easily be about war. Let's separate them with something fluffy or fun or about architecture. Like just change it up so that it doesn't, because the main goal was to have it as open-ended as possible so the person is the one making the narrative and the lines and the meaning, that it's not being steered. Um, as much as one can avoid steering when you have to use language and some imagery just as a prompt in itself.
That makes a lot of sense to me, in how it's laid out, because I am one of those people that would be easily led if things kind of went in that order, and not necessarily tap into what I was actually like feeling or remembering. Uh, and I think, I know you addressed this, but I think in past life work that there can be, especially on my end, a lot of like wish fulfillment.
Yeah.
Like I have absolutely convinced myself that I was beheaded in a past life, and I have no reason for that, like whatsoever, other than I hate tight things around my neck and I have a birthmark on the back of my neck. Those are the only
Yeah.
reasons. But like, so me like putting that into journaling is more like wish fulfillment than I've actually ever worked on it.
Well, and there's so many different interpretations with that. Yeah, I had a student many years ago where drowning was a thing, and he had a fear of water, and of course was like, I must have drowned in a past life. None of his past lives that he remembered actually bore it out. But he was like, well, where else would it come from? And I'm like, the problem is like memory is, well, first of all, sometimes there's just something that sticks in your brain. It could be from a movie you watched that you don't remember. It could be from a book you read. And it could be from something that happened to you so tiny you don't have conscious memories in this life. Or it was just something you picked up from somebody else. We did this group. First, it was accidental, and then we started to see like this pattern. It's one of the reasons I stopped doing like really big group past life regressions. Some people project their memories like really strongly, uh, even if they're not verbally sharing what they're experiencing. So we had this situation where there were about probably 15 of us, and I and a co-lead, or we're leading a past life regression. Everybody's, on the floor and on the couches and on the chairs, just, relaxed and doing their thing. One person hits into a dream about coming home to their village after a war had happened. Like they come upon just kind of classic D&D story. Like I have come home and my village has been razed, but not quite so cheesy. But what we noticed was almost every other person in that room, that the key person, the sort of linchpin person's memory was so strong. Everyone else who had a memory of war or a memory of their particular impact from war got steered into it without any verbal communication. That there was this sort of network of memory and self and vision that I and the other collaborator were sort of holding, that it started to thrum with the drums of war, and everybody heard them. So I guess my point with that is we are entangled, and sometimes the memory, or at least the feeling that is impacting you deeply, might not be yours. It might be someone close to you. It might be somebody you were watching over. And it still sticks. Like it's the emotion that sticks, it's the trauma that sticks.
That's so fascinating. I did not even know that was possible for somebody to project like that.
We had no clue either. This was, God, 2001. And we started just We did a lot of past life work. This was with House Kepru, the magical society that I founded in, oh God, 30 years ago, 1996. And past life stuff is a huge part of our theology and our personal path. And it just turned into like this, I wouldn't say a game, but just trying to spot like who was likeliest to be the the stone in the pond that would send the ripples through everybody else. Now, we were also aware that in our case, like as a group that did deep energy work and ritual, like a lot of integrated stuff together, we were uniquely resonating with one another. And also, I saw it happen at large conventions where like a Paganicon or Convocation where I would lead past life stuff for, good Lord, ballrooms full of people. And you just started to recognize the people who were projecting empaths or projecting telepaths without meaning to be. And you could kind of see almost the ripples of emotion. And I do think that it's the emotion that triggers more than anything else. Like they're feeling something, and that feel emotions are such an anchor for these memories, for memory in general. An emotion is probably the most powerful corridor through which we can pass to reach them. So if you have somebody who is a kind of projecting empath, who what they are experiencing, they are emitting into the world, other people who are sensitive can pick that up, and it steers them, it guides them. Knowing how easy it is to influence a person's journey, either through group work, through accidental projection, or just through the wrong language, like making it a little too declarative, a little too descriptive. That's one of the reasons why I tried to pare everything down so thoroughly with the prompts in the Past Life Prompt book.
And since there is, such an emotional tie and like aspect to this work, I have like two follow-up questions. Is one, is there like a best time to do this work or a best practice, like before like sleep, after waking up? And then second question would be, since it can be so emotionally triggering, is there a point where like you need to have somebody else there with you, like seeking out a therapist of some sort?
Mm. Okay, so the best times, it will vary for person to person, but a lot of folks spontaneously have past life memories in dreams. We are really open to deeper parts of our brains, especially in the liminal state between sleeping and waking. It's called hypnagogia. So the hypnagogic or hypnopompic state is where you're not completely asleep and dreaming, but you're not completely awake. And the the boundaries we normally hold in our brain become very frangible, and stuff that is carried in deeper layers of our psyche can come forward. So if you find that you're someone who does lucid dreaming and you're called to dreaming work and you tend to have really good visionary states with dreams and related trance-like work, I would say that's a very good place to also do your past life work. That's a door that works really well for you. But I also know people who one of their better and more effective techniques is to sit down in front of a mirror and stare into their own eyes until you get that soft focus and things start to sort of drift and change, and you're effectively scrying yourself, scrying the face of your own past lives until that emerges either literally in the mirror or in the way that you are perceiving yourself, and you use that as your stepping stone into something. Other people, music works, dance, motion. And again, it will vary from person to person, and as we each explore our unique practice, only we can answer what is the best doorway. But generally, something translates, something that pulls us out of here and now and the rigidity of practical this life is good. The next question is a really important one because I definitely saw people, especially God in the like early 90s, who would, I guess, I don't want to say recklessly, but you know, engage in this without any guardrails at all. And there was no one, actually, unfortunately, they would have a small group of friends who would just feed into what they were doing with no objectivity, no guardrails, no anything, until you ended up with these little clusters of people that either believed that they had been King Arthur and Guinevere, and like they would seize on archetypal stuff and just get stuck in it. Um, or people who are dealing with trauma and the only memories that are coming forward are all tied to that trauma because that's what they're reflecting. That's what's coming through. That's the only thing they can feel right then. So the first part of that answer, if you're in a delicate emotional space, understand that what you're feeling and working through is going to color all the work that you do, especially trance and meditation work, especially past life work. And what you are feeling will be answered. Um, and if you have a hard time shutting down, um, your terror or your woundedness, those are the only stories you're going to see. Um, so it is a good idea to do this work hand in hand with healing who you are now, because there's an aspect of shadow work to past life work that naturally happens. When we are wounded, when we are going through difficult times, there are answers in our past because these things have happened to us again, or we have witnessed similar things again before. And there are answers there. There are lessons that we could learn from. Uh, but the trick is to find a way to do it differently now, not just repeat the emotion, not simply tread the waters of that misery over and over and over again.
I think that all makes a lot of I have vague memories of my stepsister being one of those people in the 90s. She's 16 years older than me, so I don't have like the clearest memories of her, but I have some memories of her being one of those people in the 90s that fell too deeply into that sort of like group work where yeah, I don't think King Arthur was one of them, but um
I knew at least three independent King Arthur groups. They weren't the only ones. I mean, there were Cleopatras, I knew a Nefertiti, lots of Atlanteans. And the thing is it's something else I want to I go into with the past life thing, but that I should address is when we don't have context for what we are remembering, we often frame it in an archetype that we can understand right now. And learning that sometimes it's a narrative that we are spinning out of pieces that are incomplete at the time. So, for example, if you remember being a peasant in France and you're a girl and you go to war, the only thing we know from history is there was this gal named Joan of Arc. So obviously you were Joan of Arc, right? You're remembering Joan of Arc. But there were lots of people in similar situations, many of whom's their stories, so many stories are lost. So just because it looks like the story you know, or just because, hey, I'm a king in Greece, I must be Agamemnon, right? Uh, it's important to know that those traps are there, that it's really easy to frame it as a story we know, which is why with House Kepler, when we were doing reincarnation work, what we would do is we'd have a spotter. Not everybody has the option to do this, but if you have a buddy who you trust enough with your past life memory stuff, some of which can be really deeply personal, here's what we would do. Somebody had a memory that tied into something historical, and they are not allowed themselves to research it or look it up, just pour out as much of the memory in that life as possible and pass it along to the spotter. The spotter, separate from the memory and any entanglement with whether or not it is legitimate or that this is really this person that they think they're remembering. The spotter then does the research to check, what is this person remembering? What is the time period? Where is this actually? If they're describing clothes and things, where can we place that? And through this co-working, you get a better, more objective view of what's actually coming forth in the memory. And it helps keep the person experiencing the memories from that really all too easy trap of just being like, well, I must have been, in this army because I'm remembering, clothes that look like this, and this is the one place that I remember that happened. But history is way more complicated than that. We've lost so much.
Yeah, just just because I'm convinced that I was beheaded does not mean I was Marie Antoinette.
Right. No, exactly. But it is when somebody comes really early to this, like that seems like a logical step. And sometimes it feels like a validating step. Oh, I think I was beheaded. I can see that this story happened to someone. Now I want to relate to that person. I want to relate my story to that person. And that's where that wish fulfillment can come in, and that's where it can get really, really messy. And on the other hand, there are reasons why we are attracted to certain stories. And I think that that is useful information that is worth examining because it also tells us something about ourselves.
Do you think that somebody just jumping into this um, would get any information about their past lives that's like truly accurate in the beginning, or you think this is more like a lifelong sort of process and going to take a while of immersion before
I
anything is
think
accurate?
I firmly believe you get a lot of accurate stuff. The trick is learning how to interpret it. Because that accurate stuff may be something as simple as how a wall looks in a medieval village. And that's the one small piece in a memory that you then start filling in the blanks because you've got all these feels associated with just passing something like a beam in the wattle. So the trick is there's lots of accurate information that's been rattling around in your brain and my brain. I believe everybody is carrying stuff like this around with them, and we don't even really think about it consciously because it's such a part of the the tapestry of who we are. And being able to step back from the emotional entanglement of the memories and assess where they are stitched together with interpretation and wishful thinking and the influence of popular culture that tells us things are one way when actually that wasn't how they were back then. So the real learning is learning how to interpret the information that is coming out.
Is this still something that you are actively working on in your own life for your own
Oh
past
yeah. Oh yeah. No, I've had memories since honestly since I was cognizant. So past life stuff for me was my mom was a hippie. She got shot at Kent State in the 70s. And she
life?
had a lot of like weird, wild friends. And I was their favorite party favor. She had me when she was 20. And they were all artsy folks in theater and musicians and whatnot. And I would just natter on or draw pictures of places I'd been before. And I think the one that got my mom that hit her first with the most immediacy was I was obsessed for the longest time as a very tiny person. I would draw this woman walking on a shore with a very specific dress and a very specific hairdo and these earrings. Like I would draw her earrings over and over and over again. And my perspective is walking behind her. And obviously these are the drawings of a 3 and a 4-year-old, but there's a specific style to those earrings that I would draw over and over again. My mom ended up taking an art history class, and she comes home and she's great. She's going through all my stuff, and I'm like, what? They had gotten to Minoan Crete that had a very particular style of goldsmithing that made these tiny little round beads. And I had drawn, there was a photograph of a style of earring that I had been drawing as a 3-year-old.
Oh, wow.
So, to me, I'm just like, I loved these earrings. Like these earrings, like they stuck with me. And like I've got like a flashpoint of like what's going on with that. I've over time been like, I'm pretty sure because there's like water comes after that. Like we're on the beach because the water's gone away from the beach and we don't understand. And then all of a sudden there's just water and then there's nothing. And there is a time in Minoan Crete's history where there was a tsunami because there had been a volcanic eruption farther away than they could have necessarily seen from their perspective. And, I didn't know that at 3 for sure.
Right.
And it's still conjecture, but it fits the pieces that I had. But what I can say for sure is I drew earrings that were classic Minoan Crete earrings when I was 3. And I was obsessed with that specific design. And the only explanation I had for where that came from, like I knew at the time I was remembering them. I had seen them before. So I was never discouraged. But I will also say that I was encouraged in the best possible way, which was to explore, not gullibly, to explore with curiosity and to never assume that it was 100% right. To allow it to come and be what it was and then just learn about it afterwards, which I think you sort of see in the way that I teach and have addressed this ever since, is in the moment, let yourself experience it without question, without doubt, without filter, and then record as much as you possibly can, whether that's in words or gestures or drawing. And after you have that outpouring of whatever this is, then analyze it. Then ask your question of like why and how and where and what does it mean to me?
I love that it starts with something as small as earrings, because sometimes you hear about, having like this full fleshed out past life and remembering all the, every detail of like a full life. And it's like, no, no, it's a pair of earrings.
Yeah,
You think of everything from there.
I have some really incredibly detailed memories from previous lives, and the beginning is always something incredibly small. I firmly believe that I was in Vietnam, fought and died, and the first memory that I have of that is I'm in my sandbox as a kid, and it is summer in Ohio, which is just very muggy and buggy. And I look up because of the sound of the bugs and the feel of the sun and the feel of the wet heat. And I look at the what is just a bunch of elms in our backyard. And for a moment, I expect them to look different. I expect much thicker, greener, glossier foliage. But for the longest time, the only hook I have from that memory is the sensation of wet heat, like oppressive, like pounded bronze on your back dripping, and insects. And that's it.
And how old were you then?
Probably 5 or 6, maybe.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
will also say, like, I was a really precocious kid, and I think that I need to give the disclaimer. I had open heart surgery twice before the age of 5. I have a
Oh,
lot of memories in my very early years, I think largely because of that trauma. PTSD has a tendency to hook memories in a different way in our bodies. And I suspect personally one of the reasons, not the only, but one of the reasons memories were so easy for me, especially at that time, is the way in which I was necessarily processing a world through a body that was riddled with trauma.
That makes absolute sense.
Yeah, and the more as an adult I understand how PTSD works, it sort of crystallizes memory into an immediacy of the moment. If
Right.
you have a flashback, you're right there. It's there again, happening. There's no seam between then and now, especially emotionally. And many of my most powerful past life memories are processed the same way, but are not necessarily bad emotion, just suddenly it's like it's still there, it's still happening. In that sandbox as a kid, pushing around the Millennium Falcon or whatever, actually it was Hot Wheels, pushing around my Hot Wheels in the sandbox, there was no distinction. Like I expected to look up and see a different landscape. So I don't know. I'm going to be 53 in honestly just a few days. And I've spent, 5 decades and change, like really digging in and trying to understand why we remember and what it means to remember, and not only how to trigger it and process it, but what does it mean for this life? Because I think the really important thing, having seen a lot of people turn their heads around and basically walk backwards through their life, like they're so hung up on what they were doing before that they forget to look at what they're doing here and now. If I have an overwhelming sense of what it means, it's, carrying a parcel of photographs of where you have been that can remind you of the important things you cherished, things you learned from, people who were important to you, but all of it is meaningless except for where you are at right now and what it can tell you about who you are.
Which I think are excellent words to end on.
Yeah, sorry, I did
Just,
mention I am a wordy bastard.
I love it.
I just want to
Just,
thank you so much for being here and for sharing all of your advice and expertise and chatting all about your newest book. I really appreciate you taking the time. And listeners, that is everything that I have for you all this week. I will see you next week.
Need even more witchcraft in your life? Subscribe to Witch Wednesdays on Patreon and YouTube for all types of exclusive bonus content like spells, recipes, book reviews, and more, or even order personalized tarot readings and spells. Be sure to follow on Instagram at Witch Wednesdays Podcast, and you can find all these links and more at witchwednesdays.com.